Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 216. Today's episode is all about seeing your body as good.
What I realize is that I can literally spend the rest of my life trying to shrink my body and never being okay with it. Because if I am tying my contentment and my positive self-image to this idea that I have what I want my body to be ultimately and what the ultimate best goal is, if I am just constantly focused on that and I can't learn to see right now in a positive light, I'm never going to be at peace with my body.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
Hello, love. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that cute little button. Subscribing, sharing, and 5-star reviews are really a great way to give back if you find this show helpful. They help the show climb the charts, which helps me get even more amazing guests for you. Today, I'd like to share a review from U84AHK, who says, "My mind love journey goes a little something like this. One day I was feeling a little out of touch with myself and I remembered how important mindfulness was. I searched mindfulness in my podcast search and found Melissa's wonderful podcast. Her topics are everything I've been looking for. I'm an avid listener daily and I love the host and her presentation of the valuable insight she offers in each episode. I often listen to her podcast with my preteen son and the lessons are invaluable. Thank you, Melissa, for the love and light you spread through your very relatable episodes and commentary. You're lifting the vibrational element of the world one topic at a time." Thank you so much. This was another one of those reviews that left me glowing all day, so I so appreciate you taking the time to leave it. And now let's get to the show. If you're anything like me, you've spent way too much of your precious life hating your body. Glamour did a survey a decade ago that found that 97% of women hate their bodies. To be fair, it could just be that 97% of Glamour readers hate their bodies. I can't say that any beauty magazine ever made me feel any more beautiful. If anything, they just sent me into a comparison spiral and I came out feeling uglier than ever, or even injured somehow. But hey, at least I'd be well-versed in the viral 5-second hack to plump my lips that only takes a penis enlarger laced in gasoline to my mouth or whatever they sell in those magazines. Anyways. Another sad study showed that 53% of 13-year-olds already hate their bodies, and that number will grow to 78% by the time they reach 17. That breaks my heart, but it also kind of tracks because I would have fit right into that study. I think from the time I was about 11 years old until maybe even just a few months ago, not a day would go by where I didn't do the body check in the mirror. You know, I'd stand in the full-length mirror, check myself from all angles, pull up my shirt, put a hand on my lower belly, usually grunt in dissatisfaction, pull my pants a little higher up to cover the pooch, suck in to where I could hardly breathe, pull my shirt back down. I don't know what I was trying to accomplish by these everyday mini self-judgment sessions. It definitely wasn't a pep talk or a power pose. It's like I just needed to nag at myself so that I knew before I went about my day that I was not worthy. I remember hearing someone on a podcast years ago talking about worthiness and the signs that you might not think you're worthy. I didn't think it applied to me because overall, I've been a pretty confident person. It took me years to unravel, but what I ended up realizing is that I did have worthiness issues. But the main thing I believed I was unworthy of was my own love. I never loved how I looked, so while I knew I was worthy on the inside, or at least I had an idea, I believed that if only I could force my body to submit to my will, or to the external examples I was seeing in things like Glamour magazine, then I could make the outside match the inside. How will people know just how worthy I am if I'm wrapped up in this packaging? You'd think that as we age, we'd be more compassionate with our bodies. We get a little older and a little wiser, and we realize we're wasting so much energy, essentially destroying ourselves. That's the case for some of us, but I don't think it's the case for most of us. And it definitely does not happen naturally. Time does not heal all. It's what you do with that time that matters. And some will spend that time hating their bodies even more because if they hated their body at 20, another 20 years and no intentional work around the issues is not going to make your body easier to love. But I want you to ask yourself a few questions. Challenge your narrative a bit. What would your life be like if you loved your body? And not because you forced it into submission and you're finally 105 pounds because you're starving yourself. That's not love. That's torture. What I mean is if you really loved your body, unconditionally, no matter the size or how many rolls you have when you sit a certain way or how much cellulite you have right below your ass cheeks. You know those videos of old people that go viral because they're like 95 years old and still super in love, and the old man still thinks his wife is the most beautiful woman in the world, even though she can't get out of bed anymore and they've been together so long you can barely tell them apart? What if you had that kind of relationship with your body? The kind where you have such a bond that there's no way an extra 10 pounds is going to make you see yourself any differently than the goddess that you truly are. But the question is, how do we get there? Especially when most of us have so much work to do. So that's what we're talking about today. Our guest is Jennifer Taylor Wagner. She's a certified fitness instructor and successful blogger. She's passionate about challenging the way we think about health and wellness, and she writes on topics of healthy living and body positivity. So 3 key things we will learn are how our childhoods affect our body images, how to set healthier goals for our bodies, and how to find freedom with food and taking up space. But before we get started, I want to tell you all about the Morning Mind Love. It's basically the only email list that makes you happier when you sign up. Every weekday morning, you get a little inspiration to set your tone for the day and give you something positive to focus on, kind of like a love letter from your highest self. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you grow. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Or if you're out and about, just text the word morning to 33777. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Jennifer Taylor Wagner to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So what is your story? What originally inspired your focus on loving your body more?
That is a wonderful question. This is kind of the part where I feel like I need to just spill my heart and soul and guts right on the table. Buckle up, everybody. We're going straight in for it here. But my story is basically that of a girl who just never has been at peace with her body. So it's always sort of been a thing for me. I remember all the way back in kindergarten, a little boy who meant no harm drew attention to my cheeks and said they looked like chipmunk cheeks. And immediately I assumed he was classifying me as chubby. And there I was, automatically just not at peace with my body from that very young age. And then I found myself going on 1st grade, 2nd grade, 5th, 7th, 9th, walking through those very important formative years in a body that was larger than the majority of the bodies around me, and my peers and friends. And all of those people were constantly reminding me that my body was just taking up too much space in the room, that my body was too large, that I needed to lose weight and all of these things. And here I was not at peace with my body. And then moving on a little bit in the story, graduating high school at 336 pounds and having walked through a really hard upbringing, I was pretty broken on the inside, pretty tired on the inside and the outside. And I was there again, still not at peace with my body. And what's surprising in my backstory, and this is why I'm so passionate about what I talk about, is that I did the thing. I did the thing that a lot of us who struggle with our weight want to do, right? I lost the weight. I lost a massive amount of weight, changed my lifestyle and all these things, and dropped over 150 pounds. And here's the thing. After losing all that weight, guess what? I still was not at peace with my body. And so I kind of had this massive realization that I could change everything on the outside. I could do the thing that all of society tells me to do, make my body smaller. I can change everything about anything I possibly can, anything in my power to change of my body, but it's never going to be enough. It's never going to automatically make me just at peace with my body. And I realized, wow, I've gone on this gigantic journey with my body, but missed a humongous piece of the puzzle, arguably one of the most important pieces. And that's just, when it all comes down to it, my relationship with my body, how I feel about my body, regardless of anything, regardless of whether or not I ever lose a pound or another pound or fix this or change that. Like, what is my relationship with my body? How do I feel about it? How much of my mind and heart are taken up with thoughts about my body? In my case, negative thoughts about my body. And so that's kind of when I realized, okay, wow, we've got to shift from the external, the physical changes that I have worked for years on, and look more internally and see what the inner dialogue is looking like and what that narrative in my mind is looking like in terms of my view of my body. So that's where I told you, I was spilling my heart and soul and guts right here.
No, I appreciate it. And I resonate so much with your story. I had a very serious case of bulimia for over a decade. And so that whole body struggle, we have the same story while having totally different stories. I remember the very first time somebody called me fat. At the time, I was underweight for my age. I'm small. It wasn't an unhealthy underweight. But that moment, I started critically analyzing my body, and I was 11. And so I'm sitting there in this like really skeletal frame thinking that I'm fat, and that intruded my thoughts for so many years. And honestly, I've done a lot of work in the last 8 years healing my relationship with my body. I mean, I've been trying to for much longer than that. And oddly, the thing that finally healed it was having a baby, which I thought was going to be the opposite. And I had convinced myself for a very long time that having a baby might spiral me back. So I had a lot of fear about it. And oh my gosh, if I had listened to that voice, because I have found healing in so many of my struggles through that. I have chills just talking about it. Not saying it's the path for everybody, but for me, it's like I needed to understand, I needed to really feel a purpose that my body could bring outside of just these external circumstances. And it took me a really long time to even understand what the motives were. I would convince myself that they were better motives than they actually were. But if I got to the root, it was always for other people. But I'm curious, you had a moment when you were 5 years old, and my moment was when I was about 11, when I really started focusing on that. What is it about childhood, or why can those things affect us so much, do you think, in childhood, when we look at children as being so much more carefree, as not being bogged down by all the things of the world? But they are, whether we really like to see it or not. So why do you think it is? I don't know why it took me so long to invest in good bedding. I resisted it for years, but something flipped in me about 3 years ago. And now I'm basically a pillow connoisseur. I've tried them all, and I get weirdly excited about good bedding Because here's the thing, we spend a third of our lives in bed, and the quality of that time affects literally everything else, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about my latest obsession, Lagoon Sleep Pillows. What sets them apart is their matching system. You take a quick 2-minute quiz about your sleep style and your preferences, and then they match you with your perfect pillow. I was matched with their Otter pillow, and I am so impressed. Lately, I've just needed more support, and this seems to cradle me in all the right places. I'm also low-key obsessed with their travel pillow, which I use for way more than just travel. I actually hug it, use it as leg support, and of course, take it on trips with me. Well, the secret is in their adjustable fill. You can add or remove it to get that perfect alignment for your spine. A study even found that the right supportive pillow can improve sleep quality by 63%. And Lagoon lets you try their matched pillow for 100 nights risk-free. Free returns, no questions asked. Falling asleep has never been easier. I toss and turn less and just wake up feeling refreshed every morning. Go to lagoonsleep.com and take their awesome 2-minute sleep quiz to find your match. Use the code MIND for 15% off your first purchase.
Add excitement to your holidays with Ohio Lottery Holiday Scratch-Offs, including $1 holiday cash and $5 holiday lucky times 10, or holiday bonus millions with a 200 times multiplier and a $2 million top prize. Plus, enjoy second chance drawings where you can win 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times the price of your ticket. Scratch-Offs make the perfect gift, and best of all, there's no wrapping required. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
We look at children as being so much more carefree, as not being bogged down by all the things of the world. But they are, whether we really like to see it or not. So why do you think it is?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think those are such formative years. And from a young age, we as children are taking in a lot. I mean, the whole world around us is big, and there's a lot going into our minds and into our hearts. And it's just a lot to take in. And I feel like from a young age, if you think about it, we can't really process, especially outwardly. Like, I know for me, I was bullied for a long time about my weight before I could really verbalize to my mom what was going on and how it was making me feel. And I think that's one element that contributes to it. As children, we can't always process these things that we see and then think through them and then verbalize how it's making us feel. Even as adults, we have a hard time with that, right? Like, it's hard sometimes to pinpoint what made us feel a certain way or what might be bothering us. It might have been something that happened earlier in the week or replaying it, but we're not even realizing it. And therefore, we're not really verbalizing it to a friend or partner. We're not getting the words out to be able to outwardly process it. And so I think in childhood, not that that's the overall answer to your question, but I think that contributes to it. I think we're taking in a lot as children, and we're picking up on a lot. And so I always say, like, more is caught than taught when it comes to kiddos. And I just think that they're seeing a lot and hearing a lot, and then whatever comes in. It would have been hard for me as a kid. That story with the little boy in kindergarten that I had chipmunk cheeks, I never even said that out loud until I was a grown-up. Like now I'm 30 some years old and I talk about it and I still remember that from childhood, as crazy as that is. But even at the time, I never went home to my mom and necessarily said, and I didn't say, hey, Mom, I think I'm chubby because this boy said I had chipmunk cheeks or whatever. And it's not to say that kids will never do that, but I just think that there's so much that they're taking in. It's just a big time, and it's a lot for kids to process through. And I think that there's a lot in life and in society in general, a lot of external pressures around us. We talked about yours being an 11-year-old and just all of the messages we're receiving just in the world around us with people, or it could have been media, or it could have been anything. And there's so much coming at us all the time. I just think it plays into that idea that our bodies, the aesthetics of our bodies, is just this super duper important thing. And our bodies should always be a work in progress. And our bodies are never quite good enough. And if you reach the goal, there's going to be another goal. And that's sort of just this overarching message that we just are getting even when we don't realize it. And so I don't know, I think that trickles down even into childhood, but also into adulthood. So it's a lot to take in the world around us as far as that's concerned.
And I don't think it's just one thing. It's not
Yeah.
just that kid calling you chipmunk cheeks. It's not just the kid calling me fat. It's that I'm also seeing the covers of magazines, and I'm also seeing all the diet products, and I grew up in the 90s, so the low rise, like the models all had their ribs sticking out, and there weren't yet like anybody speaking out against that, and so I knew this is what's considered beautiful, and now I'm being called fat, so I am not worthy to be called that, or I am not ever going to be that. Oh my gosh, I need to start working now. And it's funny because I remember somebody telling me to think back, like, find that trauma. What do you think that first trigger was for you, or that first seed that was planted? And thinking back, and I'll think back to that moment. And I remember passing in the halls, and it was one of my brother's friends, and he just happened to be like trying to poke me and say, like, you're fat. He actually had a crush on me. So like, who knows what kind of, I really hope his moves are better these days, but that's what it was then. And I thought, can it really be that simple? Like, that was just such a fleeting moment. Like, there's no way. But when we really think about that, we don't remember most of our lives, whether we think we do or not. We don't remember most of our lives. Like, we can't sit there and recall every single moment. We remember like a very small percentage. And so the things that stick out as memories are the things that affected us, which is why one of your friends could come over to your house one time. And if you have people over all the time, they're like, yeah, that time I came to your house when we were 12. And you're like, I don't remember that at all. But it was the only time maybe they went to a friend's house. So it stands out clearly. We think about it that way. It's like, if you remember that clearly, there was something about it. And that might be the point that you want to start to process to kind of dampen that wound, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, totally. And I think that there's so much of that sticks with us so deeply. And I think that's one reason why when we realize later on, whenever we might realize that our relationship with our body and our self-image, the way that we see our body, when we notice that needs some attention, that we need to work on the way that we see our bodies, it's not just an overnight thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's not an overnight change, is because those formative things that happen, those things that affected you, those very tiny moments that, as you said, stick with you so deeply, they take root pretty deep, right? And I think that, I know that for me, when I realized just how not good my body image was, my view of my body, I was like, okay, well, that's not great, but also like, I don't know what to do about it. Like, how am I going to overturn all of these years of memories of people saying things about my body, and just this constant message from childhood to outside of high school of just, your body's too big, your body's too big, your body's too big. And so I just feel like that process, getting to that place of where we're not so overly consumed with negative thoughts about our body, is just such a process, because there's those moments that we've walked through. As I was writing my new book, I would think through some of those moments, and I would just sit at my computer trying to type them out, and even just processing them as I'm typing them. And I'm just crying, and I'm realizing, like, wow, in that moment, to me, my truth in that moment is that, like, that hurts so deeply. This memory or that memory of bullying and being told these really harsh things and treated in harsh ways by peers and stuff, it really can affect you, whether it is a huge thing, whether that person would ever even remember saying or doing it or whatever. It really does affect us so deeply. And I just think that's one of the reasons why it takes some time to overturn that message. So for me, I was like, okay, what in the world am I going to do to overwrite this narrative in my mind of just total body loathing? Because I was realizing just my whole day, I've got these different thoughts, whether it's what people will think of the size of my body when I walk into a room, or if my scale is too high. Back in the days of weighing yourself every day and you get on the scale and like it's up, and just all of these things, how am I going to overwrite those? And so I just think, yeah, that's quite the process to go through.
Also, the messages we receive as children so often become our inner voice. It's so interesting to me. Like, one of the ways that I started to heal my own body image was noticing how I was judging other people's bodies, because it was a direct reflection of how I was judging my own. The amount of times that I would be like in a room in my early 20s and my teens, whatever, looking at somebody else that other people were finding attractive and being like, but wait, she has a small pooch. How do people think that's beautiful if it's not beautiful on me? Like those types of conversations, which is so sad when you think about it, because it makes me have more compassion for the people who judged me, because where did they get those messages and what was their inner voice like? And so that's helpful to start with. And you said something earlier about how once you lost the weight, you thought that would be your point of happiness. And I went through that a lot too. And especially being bulimic, it was very dangerous to reach my goal. I remember there were certain points that I'm like, oh my gosh, I am exactly where I want to be, where I could actually look at my body for moments and be like, this is what I was going for. But at that moment, it became terrifying because it wasn't sustainable. I'm like, I haven't eaten in 2 days, or I have been purging everything. And I don't know if people are familiar with what it's like to be bulimic, but usually what happens is you do drop a lot of weight at first, but then you end up gaining more weight than your set point would be because you're taking in so much. Like I had days where I would be binging and purging all day long. Hundreds of dollars worth of food would go to waste that day. It was a big problem. And I'd be like, well, I can't do anything. And then I wouldn't eat for like a few days. And I would have like maybe an apple here and there. And if I'd eat the whole thing, I'd feel like, oh, I ate too much. And then it would be a purge cycle. And so when we think of that if perfection isn't the goal, then how do we start to rewrite that goal?
That is such a wonderful question. I think that that's one of the realizations that I had in how I wanted to view my body, because our bodies are always changing, whether we are binging and purging, whether we're going on a diet, whether we are doing something different in our everyday life that causes our bodies to change, whether we have a baby or any of the things, our bodies are just always changing. And I think that recognizing just how much focus is placed on our bodies is like step one. And then for me, I just sort of realized, because I would love to say like, oh, I just decided to go on this health journey and then I dropped 150 pounds and then all was well. Well, no, in all of that, there was a million times of trying and failing at different diets. There was having babies, stressful jobs, all kinds of things that were intertwined within that very long journey of weight loss. But what I realized is the absolute smallest I ever got, I look back at my habits during that time and I was like, that was so not good. That was very restrictive eating. It was so unhealthy. I was maybe at that lowest weight for like a day. And so as I began to untie my food and exercise choices from the appearance of my body, I began to be more at peace with my body. And I think that part of that, just to go back to your question, was recognizing that to ever be at peace with my body, I was going to have to start to see the current body as it is today as good and learn to appreciate this body that I have today for exactly how it is. If I never lose another pound, if I never get this fixed, or in air quotes fixed, if I never do the thing that I think I need to do, can I see, is this body enough? Can I celebrate this body, or at least appreciate this body, or at least become neutral of this body? And so I just think that that right now thought is really important in the whole process, because what I realized, I guess I'll just speak for myself. What I realized is that I can literally spend the rest of my life trying to shrink my body and never being okay with it. Because if I am tying my contentment and my positive self-image to this idea that I have of what my body, what I want my body to be ultimately, and what the ultimate best goal is, if I am just constantly focused on that and I can't enjoy the process, or not even just enjoy the process, more like if I can't learn to see right now in a positive light, I'm never going to be at peace with my body. I am always going to see it in a negative light. I am always going to be in a dieting mentality. I am always going to be trying to shrink my body. And I just got to this point where I'm like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a dieting mentality. I also don't want to spend the rest of my life consumed with negative thoughts about my body. I just don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to. Like, what would life look like if I could stop just waiting until whatever in my body and I could just learn to see? I mean, it's like so much easier said than done, right? But that was just me. I was like, I want to not be in total bondage to this anymore.
What worked for you when you were doing that? Because I remember going on that journey and trying to I had to pause when I was about to say, trying to get more comfortable naked. But for some reason, I've always been comfortable naked, but just not necessarily loving my body. Like even I'd go to festivals and be the first to strip down. I rode in a plane at Symbiosis, naked once, not loving my body. But I remember standing in front of the mirror. It was the mirror that was the scary part. If I was just free and I wasn't looking down, I could do it. But I remember standing in front of the mirror and trying to do those affirmations. And as I was saying, like, oh, I love my body is my vessel, blah, blah, blah. And there was this voice in the back of my head that was just like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. I'll share with you after what did start to finally work, but I want to hear what worked for you first. I'll share with you after what did start to finally work, but I want to hear what worked for you first.
Yeah, I think you have to recognize where you are, because I know for me, it has helped to write out some body positive affirmations for me to start with. But that just is not the stopping place for me. That isn't like the whole answer as far as for my journey. I think you have to kind of see where you are. And I think sometimes saying, well, let's learn to love our bodies, that's a really tall ask. I mean, each of us has our own story that we've gone through. Each of us has gone through things and experienced things that nobody else might have or whatever. And so we may have a disability that causes us to be like bitter toward our body, or we may have limitations that make us feel like, well, I just can't get to that place of loving my body when my body limits me in whatever way that might be. Like, we have to see where we are individually and where we are in this whole body image journey, because I would argue it's not just about loving our bodies. I think that it's a great goal, and I definitely love my body much more than I did, but it's like a different kind of love. It's a different kind of motivation where it's more like I appreciate my body so much, and that's why I want to like care for it, but I just love my body. I'm just infatuated with my body. And so just getting back to your question, I think seeing where we are, and maybe if loving our body is a really tall ask right now, maybe we step it back to just being more confident in our body. Maybe that's the first goal, or maybe that's too much to ask right now. And maybe we take it back even more and we're just neutral in our body and our thoughts toward our body. And so I think that one of the big things is just validating our story and offering ourselves compassion for what we've gone through and what has led us to where we are in our body journey today. I mean, that's been a huge piece of my journey, is just not being so just hard on myself and like hating myself into submission, because that's what I did for years. It's more like offering myself some compassion and being like, yeah, Jennifer, that was really hard to walk through, or like it was really hard to hear that specific person say that thing or whatever, and just giving ourselves some compassion to make our way through and just starting where we are in the whole process. But I would love to hear what was part of your way of changing that narrative.
I resonated with everything you said. And there are a few key things, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, because people reach out to me quite often, a lot of times with people that are dealing with their own eating things or body image things, or I hear a lot from parents who are like, how do I help my child? And it's a hard one for me because my mom found out about my bulimia, and I am still not sure to this day if there's anything she could have done that would have changed the journey. It was like I needed to be on that journey myself. And the more she came at me with it or showed her concern, the more I resisted and the more it turned on my own denial about my issues. So it might have even elongated the process, unfortunately. But first of all, the very first thing that really started to make a crack was yoga. And it's not the yoga, it's that process changed my relationship with my body, because suddenly it was about the health of my body, the movement of my body. There's a lot of messages in yoga. And I'm not saying it just needs to be yoga. It could have been something like taking up any sport where suddenly you're like, my body is helping me do this. But it also takes that focus. Like, you have to do the work. I don't think that for everyone, just starting that is going to do anything. Like, When I first started yoga, I was the one that was like, God, why aren't they doing this fast enough? Or I would do crunches while they were in a resting pose, and I'd leave before Shavasana. And I'm just like, these people, like, they just can't stick with me. Like, there's not enough energy here. Mind you, I was on copious amounts of Adderall, so that also speaks to it. But it wasn't until I combined that movement, that practice, that new practice with my body with the inner work of the little messages that I tell myself, or the appreciation, or taking a moment to notice how good my body feels along with this movement. So there was that. And then another very intentional thing that I did, which I mentioned a minute ago, was really focusing on changing my judgment of others. And so I actually, for months, and I still do this whenever it comes to mind, because it started to become a habit. When people were walking by me, regardless of if they were the most gorgeous person in the world or what people would consider the opposite of that, I would try to notice something beautiful about them. And as I did this, I started to change what I focused on, not just in other people, but with myself too. And to some people that might sound backwards, because it's like, well, a lot of people might need to change their relationship with their self before they are able to see others differently. But for me, it was so ingrained that I would hear that little voice in the back of my head every time I tried to say something positive about myself that would sound like bullshit. But when I did it with other people, it would ring more true. And it didn't even have to be like a mental compliment. Sometimes it'd be like, I bet that person is really great at something. I wonder what it is. Or I bet that person is an amazing friend. I wonder how they show up for people. I bet I could use a friend like that. It was whatever came to mind to develop some sort of compassion for somebody else. And the more that I did that, the more that it would filter through to myself.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. I think that is so powerful. And I feel like I totally resonate with that, because that was one of the things I realized is I thought, in a slightly different way, right? But in a very similar way, I thought so much of my day is spent like thinking about myself in a negative context, but it's thinking about myself. And I remember wondering if so much of the thoughts that I think in one given day, if it wasn't so overtaken by these negative self-thoughts, or these self-thoughts in general, let's just leave it at that, how would that look in the lives of the people around me? And I thought, like, I could probably be a better like friend. I could probably be a better encourager, a better inspirer to the people around me if I wasn't so consumed with thoughts about myself. And so hearing your experience with that is just incredible, how you just took it like, you know what? I'm not even where I want to be on the inside in my internal dialogue yet. I'm literally just going to shift my focus to the people externally, the people around me, and see the good in them and see their value beyond their body. And I feel like maybe that, I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like that's like a way that you began to realize that there's so much more to you than your physical body?
Yeah, because when you first start that practice, or when I first started that practice, it was difficult to do, because I'd be like, oh, I like her belt. It became like way more creative. That's how it spawned the conversations. Like, man, I bet she's the kind of person that would show up when somebody was crying. And at that point in my life, I didn't have those types of friends, because I wasn't that type of friend, and I was partying all the time. And so it started this deep yearning, and it made me realize all of these other things. And I started wishing that I had friends that were less focused on that. Whereas before, I thought I just need to become like these people. And I'm like, no, I want to be the opposite of those people. So it was a really big shift that happened gradually over time. But I've also realized that no matter what I'm going through, that shift to the focus of sending loving kindness to others, there's actually science behind it. And there's a book called The Craving Mind that I've just been reading, because I dealt with a lot of addictions in my life. And it seems for times it's like I'd heal one, it would transfer to another. And so having a baby has shed light on a lot of different things that I still need to work on. So I'm like, I need to clean up all my shit. I can't have 2 glasses of wine every night. I can't be on my phone all the time, like all this stuff. So I start reading these books, and this guy actually created experiments about what happens in your brain when you're sending loving kindness to others. And it's very similar changes that happened when you do meditation. And so when you combine meditation with sending loving kindness, it actually changes your brain. It makes you a happier person. It stops putting you in a dopamine deficit because every time we think about ourselves, the same thing is triggered in our brains as when we're scrolling through social media or we're grabbing heroin. Like all those same things, they realize it's that me center in your brain that is activated with addiction. And that's why we get so addicted to the thoughts of ourselves. So when we start to create habits of focusing on others and especially sending loving kindness, we actually heal more of our own shit than we thought was possible. So I just thought that was really fascinating.
It is. That is so absolutely fascinating. And I think that's been one of the big eye-opening things for me in this whole body image journey is like, there's so much more to me. Like, I don't want the rest of the world to reduce me, Jennifer, to the appearance of my body. I don't want to be reduced to that because there's so much more on the inside of me that I could share with the world if I don't just let it stop at the external. So that is so powerful. I love that. I love all of that you just said. And I want to read that book now.
It was actually a really amazing book. I've recommended it to multiple people, and we have a podcast episode coming up on it in December. So if you don't want to read the whole thing, tune in. Well, another thing that you talk about in your book is about taking up space and giving yourself permission. And this is something that resonated with me so much because I realized whenever I would feel fat, and I'm doing air quotes because usually it had nothing to do with the actual size of my body. It was whatever was making me feel insecure. And it's so funny because we are inclined to do the opposite of what we need so often when we're in that state, when that lower vibration or the critical state, however you want to look at it. Like I remember one time, I think it was my aunt that was like, I feel too fat to work out. And when she said that, she kind of meant it as a joke, but I've actually felt that before. I'm like, I can't go to the gym. Like, I don't feel like I can run right now, which is funny. It might have been the energy thing, but you've got to actually expend the energy to gain the energy. So there's all that. But whenever I was feeling that way, it was like I would be contracting in, like my shoulders would kind of go down. I'd be like, if you were trying to hide your stomach, put your arms over your stomach. And it was this contraction. And what changed as I healed my relationship, and I don't even think it ever changed in those moments of like, oh, my body is where I want it to be right now. It was way after that. It was when my relationship was actually different that I felt so much more expansive in my body. But what was that process for you of giving yourself permission to take up space? What did that look like and what worked?
I love that question. Yeah. If you think about why I felt like I shouldn't take up space, I feel like a lot of it does, again, go back to just being told so much, all of the bullying. That really affected me in terms of how I feel. Like I remember definitely by the time I was in high school, I was very like head down, just slide into the back of the classroom, get a seat where no one can see me, don't speak up, don't talk to anybody. I just felt like the whole world was saying like, you're not welcome to rent space in this room because your body's too big. And so I I didn't even realize that I had that mentality until just a couple of years ago even. And I realized I had spent so much of my time trying to like not be noticed because every time I was noticed, it was because of my body. So I was like trying not to be noticed for so long that even later on into adulthood, it's like, I'm still just like trying to fade into the background. And I realized, no, you get to take up space. Your body is good and you're not defined by your body. And once I became more at peace, like unapologetic about my body, I just realized that I don't have to shy away from spaces or even just memories made with my family or moments. If you think about like how as mothers, a lot of times we're like, I don't want to take my kids and go run around the beach because I don't want to be in a swimsuit, or I don't want to be in the pictures because I don't like how I look in the pictures. We miss out on so much of that. And I think that just getting to that place where I'm like, this is the body that I have. This is the body. It probably will change due to aging and such, but like it changes because our bodies change. But like, this is the body I live in. And I'm no longer going to be apologetic about my body and try to shy away when if I just can break free from that a little bit and just walk into a room and feel like I'm okay to take up space in that room and that I have something to contribute more than just my body, then I can contribute more. And so that was part of it for me, is just feeling like there's more to me. There's more that I can contribute here. And I don't want to constantly shy away and feel like I need to disappear into the background because I don't. because there's more to me than that.
I actually, for a while, would I'm specifically thinking of parties at WeWork. I used to have a space there. And I remember I was in a kind of limbo phase this one year where I had done a lot of work. I really did heal parts of my relationship with my body, but I still had moments. I wanted to just say I still have moments, but I haven't since I had this baby, but I know there will be. So I really don't feel like with most of my healing, it ever gets to a point of, oh, now I'm good and golden and good to go.
Oh, totally.
It's about having the tools in your toolbox to handle it when it comes up. So this time I was having a few more struggles, but I had my tools. And so I would go to the bathroom and I would do actual power poses like Amy Cuddy talks about. But it was more so than just feeling powerful. It was getting out of my contracted position. So shoulders back, not hunching over and standing there. And I'd be like, God, these people are so lucky to have me here. Just ridiculous things that would bring it a lighthearted moment.
Right.
Just be like, man, you're going to slay the conversations tonight. You go, girl, and spank my own ass and walk out.
I love it so much.
and so I still know that I have to go back to those things, and I have to go back to the tools or the mindset things. Or a lot of times it looks like meditation, because I know that those spiraling thoughts, often it doesn't even have to do with the spiraling thoughts. It's that I've allowed the habit to run rampant of spiraling thoughts in general. So it doesn't matter which one thing is. I can get obsessed with anything. I can get a song stuck in my head. Do I have the freedom to just be in my mind? And so finding that stillness. And so for you, when those moments inevitably come back up, what are your tools? What's that process look like for you?
That's a great point, because I definitely still have my days. It's so funny because I started writing my book actually years ago when my son was really little, and it's been kind of a long process. And I say that to say, when I started writing the book, I had just come to this beginning of this body freedom journey. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so free now. This is amazing. I'm loving my body and all this stuff. And it's so funny now, years later, I'm like, girl, you were not free. you were barely tipping your toe into the swimming pool of freedom. You were still not there. But
you're shackled in prison, staring out the window. God, I'm free.
Yes, exactly. You were not free, because I'm so much more free now. But the truth of the matter is that this thing was deeply ingrained in me, and it's going to take time. And I still to this day have times where I just struggle. And it can be anything that triggers it. It can be that I try on a pair of jeans in a fitting room and they look horrible. I blame my body instead of the jeans. It can be a friend who comes to me and is like, I just started this new diet. Look, I lost 8 pounds in 3 days. You should try it with me. And that'll trigger me, and I've got to fight against it. And so things can come up all the time that might just give me that little thought, but it's what I do with that thought when it comes in. It's like a path, whether I'm going to follow the path that I used to, saying oh yeah, my friend started that diet. Oh, you know what? I really should, in air quotes, do good. I really should get on this diet with her. I really should probably try to lose a few more. Or I can say, no, that's the path, the thought path that I used to go down. But what am I going to do with this triggering thought now? And taking it in a completely different direction. And so fighting off of those things. And so I think it comes back with having the tools that work for you specifically. For me, it does help to have in my back pocket those affirmations. That does help for me. Just reminding myself of fact versus feeling. If I feel fat, in air quotes, that's not fact. That's not factual. But what is true is that I went to the doctor a few months ago and I'm super duper healthy. So there we go. So that's what we're going to focus on. And that's the path that we're going to go down. And we're going to think in our mind about those things and being happy that I'm healthy and how I can continue to care for my body in a way that is holistic and that is motivated with the right reasons and those kind of things, rather than going down that rabbit trail that never served me in the past. In fact, it was very detrimental in the past. And so I think it's not getting rid of those triggers completely or getting rid of those thoughts that are going to come. I don't know. I have not reached the end of my life life yet, but I don't think that they're ever just going to completely disappear and I'll never have a negative self-thought ever again. I think they might still keep coming up for as long as I live is what it feels like in this moment. But it's what I do with those thoughts that really makes the difference for me. And I look at it like a path that I'm going down. Am I going down that same path of self-loathing and seeing the absolute worst in myself and reducing myself to the size of my body and deciding I'm going on another diet or obsessing over food or restricting? Am I going down that way or am I going down this other way? And another thing that's really and it was very shocking to me to see how closely correlated this was, but I decided a while back to completely get rid of just a dieting mentality in general, rules, restrictions, anything that just has weight loss as the center focus of it, like getting away from any of that train of thought in general. And that was really hard at first because I was so ingrained in it. But I am really amazed to see that getting away from that dieting mentality has been one of the best and most powerful tools in being at peace with my body. And I'm like mind blown by that because I didn't realize it was so closely correlated, but it is. And so when you begin to like untie what you eat, what you do for movement and all of those things, when you untie that from the appearance of your body or the number of pounds on the scale, you look at things so totally differently, and it just becomes so much easier to be at peace with your body because if you think about it, you're then not spending all day focused on changing your body. You're just living your life and you're eating what makes you feel good and makes you feel energized and doing movement that gives you energy and all of those things. You're not focused on, if you're hungry, you go in the kitchen, and if you're in a dieting mentality, you're like, what fits in my calories? What fits in my macros? Is this good? Is this going to make the scale go down? All of these things that have nothing to do with what our body's cues are, what our bodies are telling us they need. It's all like a dieting mentality. Whereas if you're untying that and you're like, no, I just need to nourish my body in a way that makes my body feel good and energized. I'm hungry. I'm walking into the kitchen. What sounds good to me right now? What would be really satisfying? What do I feel well when I eat? And so I'm saying that to show the difference of mentality when it comes to like a diet mentality or not, because getting away from that dieting mentality has brought so much peace and freedom in my journey to loving my body.
I love that because food is such a tricky thing. It's like one of those things where if you're trying to get off heroin, you just don't keep heroin in the house. But right. With eating issues, it's right there. And as somebody who was bulimic, binging so much, like I had no sensor in my stomach anymore to tell me when I was hungry or when I was full. Most of the time that hungry feeling was more of the craving. I need something emotionally. And so one of the things that I always say is that it's so important to know how you're being influenced if you want to live intentionally. And one of those ways is there's a difference between dieting and then understanding what your food is doing. And so if there's foods that are like made to make you addicted to them, then beating yourself up because you feel addicted to them, it's not your habits, it's the actual ingredients, the chemicals that are in that. So know that. And that's not to say to completely restrict and whatever. My mom said to me at one point, she's like, you're just so restrictive with your eating. And she didn't mean it even in a bad way. But I was like, I would challenge you to change that word because I eat what feels good to me. I eat what I now crave. And I do say no to certain cravings at a certain point because I stop and I ask myself, where's this craving coming from? Do I actually need this? Can I let it pass? Like, I try not to do like do I deserve this treat? Like, you always deserve the treat, but it's like, I've eaten a whole chocolate bar. Do I need another one? It's going to make me feel sick. Like, understand cause and effect. Food coma that we have all somehow made seem normal is not normal. Food should be fuel. So if you feel like you're just like laying there afterwards and can't move, you might have done food in not the best way for you and your body and whatever you're trying to cultivate. And so for me, changing my relationship with food was a big step. And that looks like I do not eat a lot of things. I'm vegan. I eat mostly whole well, I call it vegan because I eat eggs now. But I'm mostly plant-based. I eat well. And sometimes I will buy Mentos at the gas station or whatever. And like, I don't beat myself up about it. And so it's more about like, what is the energy I'm carrying around this food and what that looks like for you, what you consume is up to you. It doesn't have to look anything like mine, but to feel good about what you're putting in your body, I think is a big step. There's something else that you talk about that I want to shed light on and talk about how it's important to actually talk with our partners or the people close to us about our body journeys. And some people's natural instinct is to hold that in. And it might even be because they're like, well, if I share it with people, it's shedding light on my insecurities, which make it worse. Or I don't want to bog people down with the troubles that I'm going through or whatever. So when you talk with people about what you're going through, what does that look like and why is it beneficial?
I feel like when I can get it out, because I know for me, I can spend a lot of time just in my own head. But when I can get it out with a trusted friend or my husband who I'm really close with, it just makes worlds of difference. And I think the more that we shy away from something, the bigger, like it becomes this big thing. It's like a stigma, like it's taboo. And so I think that even just finding really small, safe ways to talk through your body journey or how you're just feeling about your body with a safe person, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go blast it on social media, or you don't have to like tell everyone. But if you can find a space, a person who you feel comfortable with, that you can talk through all of this stuff with, I just think it helps us to process, because inside our own heads, things can spiral really quickly. Like we can start believing these things in our head that are just going, I could start believing so many terrible things about my body because my mind could go in just a spiral. And if no one stops it, then if I don't stop it, no one else stops it. Like it could go crazy. But when we have this safe space where we can, or a safe person that we can talk through things with, I think it just helps us to process through where we are, and then helps us to get a little bit deeper and dig a little deeper to see what are the things that are actually affecting us? Like, what is the actual root to this feeling that I'm feeling about my body or about my journey or about whatever? I don't know. I just feel like it helps us to get to the root of things a little better. And I think even with those conversations, like it can be small pieces. Like we're not always ready to like bear all of our heart and soul in one huge conversation, or maybe we are, and then, hey, let's do it. But if we can just find these small opportunities with a safe person to talk through things, I think it just helps to a little bit destigmatize the challenge that we go through and helps us to organize our thoughts a little better and get deeper into the root of what is causing these issues. And that's a really good thing, because as we do that, of course, knowledge is power, or enlightenment can spark change. So like once we know these things and know these things about ourselves because we've had this conversation with a trusted friend, I don't know, I just feel like that can make way for so much healing in our journey.
I totally agree. I found so much healing when I finally started sharing. I can still remember the first moment I shared my struggle with bulimia. I felt comfortable sharing about it when I was on that healing journey, when I felt more confident, because I was so afraid for people to then watch my habits. Yeah. But then now after that, it was like this huge weight was lifted, and suddenly healing became so much easier somehow, because it wasn't this shame that I was carrying at the same time. I wasn't trying to go on the journey with this huge weight on my back. And so now I usually share what I'm going through at the same time. Like I've been sharing about giving up alcohol recently. And I just had a moment the other day. It's really funny. I don't remember what brought it up, but I ended up sharing with my husband that one of my insecurities is like, I smile too big and it shows too much gum. And one of my previous best friends, I don't know her anymore, but at the time when we were supposed to be best friends, I remember we were looking through photos of ourselves and I was like, I like this one. And then she's like, you know, you can get Botox to not show that much gums, and you can actually smile differently too. Like this was a comment that my best friend and I was like, and it was like this gut punch. And at the same time, somebody that I know that was like an aunt to me growing up got surgery to fix that about herself too. And I had always loved her smile. And so it wasn't until I like said this out loud to him, and this was like last week, it was a moment where I just felt the shedding again, and I could see where it came from. I could see that. And then it was so healing too, because he's like, I never knew that was an insecurity of yours, which I've shared plenty of my insecurities. And he's like, and it's so weird because I've always loved that about you. And he started naming all these other girlfriends of him that have the same thing that he's always thought are beautiful and that they have the best smiles. I feel like I want to cry just thinking about it, because it was just a moment and I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until that moment, and then now sharing it with you. And so I do really think that sharing is so, so healing. And so thank you so much for this incredible conversation. And I know that a lot of people are resonating with you as much as I have been this whole convo. So for listeners that are wanting to read your book and learn more about you and connect, where's the best place for them to connect with you online?
Probably the closest connection is probably Instagram. I spend time over there on the gram, which you can just find me at Jennifer Taylor Wagner. Same for my website, jennifertaylorwagner.com. But my brand new book is called Your Good Body, and it's embracing body positivity, a body positive mindset in a perfection focused world. And so I'm excited to share that with everybody, but I'm excited to connect with everybody. And I have loved chatting with you today, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/216. Your challenge for this week is twofold. The very first one is I want you to get a little comfortable naked. Yep, just embrace that naked body of yours. Maybe you're by yourself, maybe you're with your partner, and just be a little extra naked for the day. And when you walk by a mirror, give yourself a compliment instead of a put down, which I know is really difficult to do. The other one is to start a conversation with somebody that you can feel vulnerable with about some of the issues you have with your body. Sometimes just talking them out makes you hear how ridiculous you sound. Those are two difficult challenges if you're not used to loving your body, but they are a big step in actually getting comfortable with your body and beginning to build the relationship. Your relationship with your body is exactly that. It's a relationship. You can't change it just in one day. We tend to be able to see relationship dynamics more clearly when it's two people outside of ourselves. So if somebody treated their partner the way you treat your body, you'd be like, what is going on? Now imagine if you're trying to build a relationship with somebody. You have a crush on that person. How do you start? You start by getting to know them. You start by asking them questions, knowing them deeper, knowing what they love, showing them that you care by paying attention to those things and giving those things to that person. What if you treated yourself that same way? What are your favorite things? What can you find out about yourself that you didn't know because you didn't slow down enough to get to know that part of you? All of these little things develop over time. I still learn about myself every single day, but it takes that stillness, and meditation helps as well. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. If you love Mind Love, there are several ways you can support the show. The first and very best one is by joining Mind Love Premium. You can do that at mindlove.com/premium. You get all the backlogs of our exclusive episodes, plus meditations and other bonuses. And you can also do that right in the Apple Podcasts app. I do prefer my website, but honestly, whatever's easier for you, and I'm grateful. You can also support one of my amazing sponsors. It's a win-win. You get something you love, and they support me for longer. You can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and you might just get your review read on the show, or you can just share it and tell people how much you love it. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.